Hey, Jeff Lutz, it's always great to have you on board, especially on a day like today. I've been saying in pimping this particular episode, I've been saying, who would I rather have on, right after earnings and the Fed and everything else than Jeff Lutz, followed by Brian Wang. I mean, that's a pretty good setup after a day like today. But let's
Yeah, you
start.
have great people, Randy, on your shows. So there's a lot of great choices, but glad to be here.
Yeah. So let's start with something that just broke. All right. Because the last 2 days, everybody's been talking about Farzad and back and forth, and whether there's going to be a cybercab with a steering wheel and pedals, and on and on. Oh gosh, we need it because they maybe we can't make it. Maybe we can't put enough taxis into service. Maybe we can't sell enough of them without steering wheels and pedals. Maybe we have to have it because of NISTA and the 2,500 unit rule. But what just popped was some guy showing the regs, and there was a regulation passed in 2022 that says as long as you're willing to self-certify and make the driver side door as safe as a normal passenger side door, you have to self-certify that it passes the tests on that side as well. You can, and oh, it has to be level 4 or level 5, which obviously, if you're not going to have a steering wheel and pedals, it better be level 4, level 5.
Yeah.
That there's no 2,500. That's a special situation, kind of an edge case, according to the reporting. So, what do you think about all this kerfluffle in general?
I think it is kerfluffle. This never comes up when, one of Uber's, 47 announcements of partnerships. I mean, they almost have more partnerships than allowable robotaxis, apparently. So it never comes up there. It never comes up in any other conversation. It only comes up in context with Tesla. But it's absurd on its face because as a country, from the president on down, it's been clear that we need to lead in AI or we're going to get steamrolled and we're going to be a second tier country or second into China, both economically, militarily, tech, and from a tech perspective. So there's just no way that he's going to allow it. His transportation secretary has literally said, like, we have to have smart regulations in this space, but we have to put the United States in a position to lead. And limiting the United States or a particular company to 2,500 is not positioning the United States to lead. So I think these things are going to be more data driven than and less bureaucratic and ivory tower like they have been in the past. I'm sure there's going to be regulations that we don't like. I'm sure there's going to be regulations that Tesla and others have to work through, but all of these companies are dependent on growth in this area, and automating driving is a massive productivity gain. And it's really the beginning of automating other things in the real world. So why would you cut it off at its knees? It just doesn't pass the common sense test.
All right. So, speaking of productivity, I want to talk about the Fed today. So, the Fed cut the 25%, but then they unkindly were hawkish, and pretty interesting because Nicholas Gibbs last night said he thought they'd be hawkish. I don't know how he does it. He keeps on, he's got ideas. But anyway, so a slightly hawkish statement of don't count on December uh, took the markets down a peg. What did you think?
I didn't get it because I've never seen the Fed chair promise cuts in ensuing meetings that haven't happened. He's always answered the question of, we'll get more data between now and then and we'll make a decision. We're not making decisions for multiple meetings. It's clear they're in a rate cutting cycle. The question is the pace. I think, if he's going to be a hawkish cut or a dovish cut, I think those things get forgotten about after a few days.
Mhm.
I think there's something of the moment of the trading day, maybe the next trading day. So, and again, it's not an unfair thing to try to forecast and understand how the Fed is going to be. I just don't think it matters beyond a day or two. What matters is we're a quarter point lower, and it- like anything, it's going to be data dependent. Why he had to insert that? I mean, it's obviously pre-planned
Yeah,
commentary
sure.
around it, and then every single question was basically, "Why isn't the world coming to an end?" That was every single question. It was just phrased slightly differently. Based on what you're seeing in jobs, why isn't the world coming to an end? Is the stock market too high? Like all of these, I can't believe people are paid to ask these kind of questions to the Fed chair, but they are. And really, it felt like I'm not into conspiracies, but it just felt like as the stock market appreciates, it's very good for the president and this administration.
Yeah.
And 98% of the media vote a different way than the current administration. So it just felt like every question was, why isn't the economy really worse than it is? And which would actually drive the Fed chair to cut more.
Yeah,
So I
exactly.
don't understand the logic of it. I don't think anybody is necessarily going against the cut, but it was every question was a setup for why can things be much, much, much worse?
Yeah,
And I think it's okay to have a healthy balance of that in the meeting.
sure.
I don't think it's okay for greater than 90% of the questions to be positioned that way. It's not helpful. And you have to step out, you have to double click out on these things. He's only there for 6 months. I think he's had a distinguished tenure. I think he's made some very critical mistakes. I also think the Fed ultimately engineered the V-shaped COVID recovery.
Mm.
Um, but in general, I think he's going to be remembered mostly favorably. He's got 6 months. The federal funds rate is much higher than what real inflation is at.
Right.
I agree with his commentary on tariffs, which are, yeah, some prices are going to go up, but it's going to be a one-time thing, more contained than everything going up. I hope we get a little bit smarter on tariffs. That could be a different conversation. In some areas we are, in other areas I'm not so sure. Um, but yeah, I mean, he's flying a little bit blind. He's got data. By the way, people are acting like the government shutdown. Oh my God, where are all these people running around grocery stores with clipboards? What are we going to do now? Like it's not a real huge step back in data. I get it that we are losing some data,
Yeah.
but if you look at the kind of data the Fed collects and how it makes decisions, it's abhorrent given the size of this economy and given the implications on the rest of the world that we collect grocery price data by people running around grocery stores with clipboards. And we go and call people on the phone for all these
Yeah.
different
Yeah.
manual surveys versus we're in the age of AI. You've got all these hyperscalers building supercomputers. You have the government who basically just NVIDIA announced is buying 7 supercomputers yesterday.
Right.
Why isn't there a supercomputer allocated for the Fed?
Yeah. Yeah.
And
No kidding.
but anyway, we can that could be its own show. Like I said, the markets dip, dive, head fake through the whole Fed. He was fine. He cut 25 points. It was a hawkish cut. It was a pre-planned statement of don't think this is going to happen again in December. Like he's never,
Said that.
ever,
I know.
ever projected a rate cut months in advance of a meet or or more in advance of any meeting.
Right. Right.
The
Oh,
meeting
yeah.
could be in literally a day, and he would say, "Well, we're still going to be data
It's running.
driven." He won't say anything, and there's no blackout period any day anyway before it. So I didn't find it to be is newsworthy. This will be forgotten. It's on the hyperscaler earnings.
So you were talking about the wonderful questions, and of course, we commonly talk about how terrible the questions are at the Tesla calls from this financial press. And again, you have to hold your head sometimes and wonder do they do any significant homework? Because to me, you and I have talked about this before, but the question that should have been asked is, what is the impact of AI going to be on inflation and on jobs? Because those are I just finished a book with 9 of your friends, you know,
Yeah.
which you were invited, by the way.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, just so busy. Anyway,
Maybe I'll add an addendum at some
maybe
point, but
so, maybe so. So we had, in the book, what do we talk about? I mean, sure, we talk about the massive abundance in the future that's going to come out of this, but the keys are the productivity that's going to come out of this, which is going to drive down inflation, and the question of how does the jobs thing work out? But they didn't even ask that, which to me would be the most obvious thing to ask.
yes. And the Fed should have a position on that. It should be studied. It should be data driven. It should be they should update it. They should step up to the microphone and give an update on their policy stance as it relates to AI, but they just want to pretend to be ignorant of it and be aware of the acronym, but not really get into what it can mean for productivity. They should have people studying this. They should be hiring experts, application people that are actually that were writing code or building systems, last week. They should be hiring people to really study and understand this. I don't think you do something necessarily hyperbolic and do a 100-point basis cut or something because of it at this point, but it should inform your policy positions and you should be speaking to it. Uh, so we'll see what happens. I think the jobs picture, I mean, there is definite slowness in job growth. Is it cracked? Is it off the rails? I don't think so. But we're also flying blind with this manual non-farm payroll data, which gets changed by 100% or more anyway. So I feel like we're flying blind, even if there is the data, until somebody steps up and says, "I have found the problem. I have found the underlying problem in making non-farm payroll data and why we're off upwards of 100% in a 90-day period." And I have since found the root cause and we have since corrected it. Until somebody does that, I'm not necessarily losing my mind. I can look at this ADP data. I can look at this Challenger job cuts. I can look at JOLTS. There's other things I can look at. They're bad. They're in arrears. Maybe ADP is a little bit more real time, but I don't know. I'm just not losing my mind. I think the bigger crisis with the Fed is it's too big, it's too bloated, and its data inputs are antiquated, old, and not up for the age we're in, which is AI. And back to your original question, they should be studying the implications of that and have policy positions ready to act. But uh, yeah, that's neither here nor there.
Well,
I think
and
it's I
yeah,
think December. I think the December probability came down a bit after those statements.
sure.
But I think we need a couple more data points. We need to see what's happening. But anything, the markets look 6 months ahead, and 6 months from now, there is a Trump Fed chair.
Right.
Whether it's, I mean, I think the president would literally put himself in that position if he could. So if it's not going to be that, it's going to be someone as close and akin to that as possible. And there's some really sharp candidates in that pool. I mean, people that
Yeah.
really understand markets and monetary policy. So there's some really good selections in that pool.
The other thing I thought they completely missed, and at least the question was asked, but I thought the answer to the question was terrible. And again, maybe you can disagree with me, but I've been saying for weeks and weeks and weeks that the reason the Fed needs to cut. See, people say, why does the Fed need to cut when the economy is going crazy and stock market's off the, it's going nuts? Why do we need to cut rates? Because the parts of the economy that are still in recession are the parts of the economy that will be impacted by the rate cuts. The potential for home builders to get lower cost loans is going to help the home builders to build homes. If you reduce the cost, the Fed rates the cost of durable the borrowing for durables goes down, and therefore you sell more durables. Um, if you sell more durables and you start building more houses, then transportation picks up, which is the third category that's been in such trouble. And of course, kind of as an overview of that, manufacturing has been in trouble, and manufacturing, of course, includes durables. And so I don't know why, when he was asked that question, why he didn't reflect on the idea that, yeah, the mortgage rates may not go down. In fact, they're going to go up based on what happened to the 10-year. But all these other things will come down, which is where the economy's been hurting.
Yeah, I do agree with a lot of that. I also think the Fed and some of these policy decisions are really hurting the housing market. And I guess we had 0% new home sales growth. Today was reported in the morning. I think the expectations were
That's
over
pending.
1%. I think we had
Zero on pending, Yeah.
pending. And I think last month, well, I think the expectation was just over 1%. We're at zero. Last month was over 4%, was a big surprise. So I don't know if this is just data normalization. I don't know if this is seasonal, but I mean, it was definitely expected to be over 1% and it's zero. So you do have to ask the question, just like when it beat last month, you still have to ask critical questions of what's going on in housing. And in general, inventory levels are too low. And now we're making the cost to finance and build homes. It's been too high and we're making it higher by keeping interest rates so high for so long, and then again tariffing inputs on things we don't have sufficient domestic supply of yet. This is why copper's at an all-time high.
Well,
And
copper, part of the reason on copper, by the way, they did have this major copper,
I
the
know
second largest copper mine in the world had this collapse. And
all the
so,
reason to take some of the tariffs down temporarily until
yeah,
supply
yeah,
and demand
yeah.
are equivalent. I don't understand. I I think the government can do a lot more on permitting and do a lot more to accelerate and award or incentivize manufacturing growth here than just blocking everybody else out.
Hmm.
But I know it's complicated. I don't think the tariff should be zero on copper, by the way.
Right.
And I know they've been taken down significantly as well since they were instantiated, but there's clearly something going on with homes. There's clearly something going on in the auto industry. And we saw the announcements from GM today. They had their earnings announcements, and there were flowers being thrown over them last week, and everything's the greatest. Oh, the less EVs we build, the better our earnings. Don't worry.
Right.
We're going to build more of these other things. And all of a sudden, it's like, well, wait a minute. We're going to lay everybody off and we're going to blame the EVs we weren't even
EVs.
building. We're building 50,000 EVs a quarter, but apparently it takes 5,500 people to do that. None of this makes sense. Uh, Four of the top selling EVs in the US are three of the top four outside, or sorry, two of the top four are GM. They're made in Mexico. By the way, we don't know where these layups are. I don't know if they're all the US based
Oh, yeah, yeah.
or abroad. But the point is uh, there's something broken here. We have negative manufacturing job growth. We have stagnant pending home sales. And I think it's a combination of the Fed and some of our domestic policies. And again,
And,
I want to be very clear. I'm not anti-tariff. I'm
yeah,
not anti getting really good trade deals. I'm more of just like, let's look at what we grow and what we know here and what we build and just make sure we understand we're not like, there should be somebody every day sitting in commerce and saying, what's aluminum supply look? What do billets look like? What does steel look like? All the different grades. What is copper? What does it look like? Do we have if we have a supply problem, we know our costs are going to go up. And so I don't know. It just feels like we're missing people in commerce that build things, and we just have a bunch of lawyers and economic theorists
uh,
doing things. I think most of the decisions are actually good, but a lot the ones that aren't good are I think are really hurting jobs and they're hurting housing and they're hurting manufacturing.
Yeah, and we have another problem, I think, which going along a list of problems, why aren't things doing a little better than they are? And one of those would be the press, the mainstream press, which is slowly being bought out, taken over by the good guys. But the mainstream press is still talking down the economy because they don't want it to succeed. And so when you do these surveys, like the Michigan survey and the consumer confidence and the consumer sentiment surveys, you got these people taking the surveys say they think that inflation is going to be 5.4 next year. And it's like, where did you get that number? Nobody's even close to that number. I can't find an economist in the world that thinks we'll be at 5.4. We might be at 3.1, we might be at 2.5, but we're not going to be at 5.4. And so people are nervous about the tariffs and nervous about inflation because why? Because they're being told that it's a problem.
I remember the UMich survey, I think it was from 2020 or 2021, the year before we had 9% inflation, the highest inflation probably on record because we've changed how we measure
Right.
inflation even since the Carter years. So a year from now, we're from that survey, we're supposed to have the highest inflation ever, but it was their home team in office. What did they predict? They predicted like like upper twos or low threes
Right.
for inflation. And then soon as this president gets in, they predict 6, 7, 8%, all these wild, outlandish numbers.
Yeah.
And what people started doing, and you saw the markets even reacting this way too. The markets used to really react to University of Michigan surveys. And when all the political bias charts came out and said, look, the surveys go like this during Democrat administrations, they go like this during Republican administrations. People look like, okay, this is basically BS. And
Yeah.
then the markets really started getting more muted to it.
To end this part of our
But
conversation.
you're right on the media. I mean, it comes full circle to that
Right. Right.
that press conference with the Fed. Everything was
Yeah.
geared to, and it's not all left leaning. It's even Murdoch owned media that
Yeah.
doesn't like the current administration. Just say like, I don't like the fiscal policy we have. Like, I want everybody to just run over us on trade, and I want to globalize everything. So that's the Wall Street Journal, and then you have all the left leaning. So basically, everything in that conference room was, why isn't the economy literally rolling over and dying between now and the next meeting? And what are you going to do about it?
Yeah, and I want to throw in one last anecdotal thing to this part of the conversation before we get on to the earnings. And that is that my neighbor, who's a real estate guy, who hasn't sold a house in months, in the last 2 weeks, 3 homes in escrow. So I just ask him all the time because it's just, again, it's just anecdotal, but it's gonna cause me to follow up now because I think, his point was people that need to buy a house need to buy a house. And so there's pent up demand. As you point out, there's even though their inventory is the best it's been in years, it's still not great. I've been studying this for 17 years. I've had real estate clients, and I've been studying it for 17 years. And the amount of inventory that we have is still at historic lows prior
Correct.
to 2000 and let's say 15, something like that. So
It's
it's
very regional. There's no kind of like one thing for housing, but
sure.
the markets that were on fire for years, I think are the ones that have a lot of inventory now. And the ones that really didn't have those kind of peaks still have pretty low inventory. So I think it's really more of a regional thing.
Sure.
But until we cut interest rates and
Mhm.
until we make home buying a little bit less expensive, it's going to be an issue. We have to get it's all supply. We have to get supply up, or it's going to be an issue for a long time. By the way, a lot of people think that they have a lot of equity in their homes, and they feel like
Yeah.
that's part of the wealth effect, and they feel really good about that. But I don't know. We'll see. It's causing ballooning property taxes too, in other areas. So there's some effects of this that aren't very good. So just the whole tax situation and the 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 home situation, autos. There's some sectors that could be considered approaching a recession. or
Yeah.
in it.
In
It's
recession.
hard to say.
Hmm.
But it's hard to say that the economy is doing bad if the GDP is approaching, what is it? What's the latest? I don't know, 384?
3.9, 3.9.
Yeah.
In
Yeah, it's hard to say that. And the only thing that's out there to me is that it's of concern, and I think we're going to solve it, is just monetizing AI in a really effective manner. And I think Tesla is actually going to lead the
yeah.
way. I think Tesla is going to start lapping people in in monetizing AI.
Well, speaking of all of that, we have three companies today who reported earnings. We got Alphabet, we've got Meta, and and we had Microsoft. And two of the three are down in after hours tradings, but Google is up big time after earnings. I think the reasons for the other two being down are maybe kind of like Tesla, kind of like one-time things. Although Meta could be a little bit more of a long-term question. But anyway, what did you think about the three earnings results?
Well, they were certainly all very strong going into earnings. So their earnings had to be really good. And I think as we're recording this, either their calls are starting or they're beginning to wrap up. So we don't really know what they've said on the calls.
Mhm.
Typically, you get more refined guidance. I know the meta guidance was lower than anticipated. I know there were some one-time things with EPS, but it looks like in terms of their advertising business, its efficiency and effectiveness are still extremely strong. The question is all these dollars going into Reality Labs, when are they going to monetize this?
4 billion,
And
4 billion loss in
when
reality.
is it going to be something meaningful? You had the issues of the what I forgot what they even called it before, what they were doing with the metaverse, and they really drove a lot of that into the ground, and it really actually helped investor confidence that they're really positioned. And then they did a lot of cutting and firming up of the team. So I think they're trying to figure it out. I think what people are trying to understand with Meta is are they going to monitor which avenues are they going to be very effective at monetizing AI?
Mhm.
I think it's very clear that it's helping their advertising business. I think it's very clear it's helping Google's advertising business. Google blew the doors off on revenue. I think all the concerns of Chat GPT or Perplexity eating Google search have been appropriately and absurdly put to bed. So we'll see what happens. In general, I think they're strong. I think they all reiterated massive capex spend growth,
Yes.
and this is what the analysts see. We only get exposure to these companies for 60 minutes every 90 days,
Right.
where they can talk about their business, and then the other set of 1,000 hours and thousands of hours in between that, we have to listen to pundits on TV or people like you and me. But I'd like to think that people like you and me do a fair amount of research, and there are people that are actually in uh, and know these businesses very well, or what it takes to run these businesses. So, but that's a very few set of pundits out there. So basically, what you'll get now for the next 89 days is, again, what drives clicks. What drives clicks is you as a pundit describing what could be catastrophic, cataclysmic, um, and you doing that for 80 to 90% of your content. And that's what we're going to probably hear. But this has been this way for the last 8 quarters, which was when is CapEx spend going to roll off a cliff? And we've gotten the answer now, and it's
Not,
basically everybody's growing at 40 or 50% next year. And we haven't even started including all the sovereigns and all again, the US just said they're buying seven supercomputers, uh, for as quickly as possible,
right.
and that's not even in there. So the net takeaway is I think these businesses are very strong. I think there were some unexpected things with Meta. Let's see how they get through. I think they were flying high into earnings.
Yeah.
Google was flying high, and Google's going to fly higher.
Yeah.
It looks like so. We'll see what happens. Microsoft, they settled their investment with OpenAI with this opaque
Mhm.
structure which I think is is more complex, but they announced it as more streamlined and easier to understand. So they're trying to get themselves ready to go public at some point. So that will be unbelievable when that happens for markets. So Microsoft, they have to see where they're at, and then we have Amazon coming up. And if Amazon doesn't get over 20% growth in AWS, I mean, they're going to be in some serious trouble. I don't like the news flow ahead of the Amazon earnings if of like we're going to lay off thousands,
Yeah,
tens of thousands of people.
yeah,
That's typically not good news flow going into earnings. You have Apple coming up. You have a mixed bag all over the place. You have people saying that the iPhone 17 and suppliers are cutting this or that. Let me give you the cheat sheet on some of that stuff.
good.
Sometimes it's good. The supplier information is good. Most of the times it's bad. And when you have a company like Apple, where the product line is so big, iPhone is so big, there is more than one supplier making the parts for their iPhones. So if some supplier announces, like, oh, we think our orders are cut, in most cases, there's two other suppliers, uh, and Apple could be shifting demand between those two. It is really, really hard to understand if they're really cutting supply or not. But we'll see what happens. I think what they did with iPhone 17 was actually quite good.
You mentioned
I
that.
don't believe the numbers on I think the iPhone 17 Air numbers are going to be better than people think. I think that is a while it's not a new concept to really thin out the phone. Samsung did it last year. Motorola did it 10 years ago with a 5.1. We did it with a 5.1 millimeter phone, thinner than this. For Apple, it is a much better experience, and it's just another reason for people to buy the product. There's also some data in terms of upgrade cycles, and uh, the 17 is a solid product. So I think they're going to do. I think they're going to do well. And I think their derivative iOS business is going to do well. I think earnings are going to be fine
I'm
overall.
talking about potentially being over 15% increase, which would be, I guess you have to go back to 2021 for a
Well,
15%.
that's what they forecasted, but they forecasted that for the last two quarters, and it's been like 30% on the Mag 7 names, the earnings
No, I was
increases.
saying
So
overall, the
yeah,
overall earnings at 15,
yeah, yeah,
which would be
yeah. So I mean, this is significant growth. And so I think the market is in the Fed is in a cutting cycle. It's clear the administration is pro markets, pro US economy, pro AI. AI is driving, it's by some estimates 35 to 40% of the GDP. So you don't have this cognitive dissonance of like, I don't look at markets, I don't care in the White House. You have somebody that is looking at markets and does care in the White House. You have a pro-growth Fed coming in, and markets look ahead on that. So, to me, that's the setup. Could there be a 5 or 10% correction? I mean, we've melted up from 4,900 S&P to 6,900 S&P since April, and we'll get into my comments on Berkshire Hathaway after this because they got a lot of flack for that. But um, yeah, we can have a little cooling off. That's fine, but those things are still true about the Fed and about earnings growth.
Oh, so yeah, I did see your post about Berkshire. So let me see. Yeah, were you suggesting that they might have made an error 18 months ago or
Yeah, you can't. It's just the rule on X and on and conventional media is you can't criticize Berkshire Hathaway. You can't criticize. You can't. If you do, like the doors open and all these people want to step out and say you have to look at it over his 80-year career, and that's what I started the post with of like greatest trader of all time, full stop.
Right.
But what I was actually critical of is what the media does, and what the media does is they will post on X, they will post on all of social media and on fintech 10 times a day. Buffett's cash hoard. It is now 340 billion. It's now this.
It's
And I'm like, All right, the market's melted up from 4,900 S&P to 6,900, and that cash hoard hasn't been materially put to work. You gonna be critical of that, or are you just gonna use it as a spook and scare technique for people in markets of saying like, look how smart this guy is. He's sitting on a ton of cash. And all I'm saying is if you're gonna like line, yeah, we can't have these people that are just deities all the time and nothing can be criticized. I think you got to look at that and say, well, what are they doing?
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
And what are they doing in AI? What are they doing in some of these other hyper growth areas? And that, I mean, Berkshire, the stock is down 9%. And the S&P's up whatever 30 plus percent. And he's been down 9%, 9.5, 10% since May 3rd.
Since May 3rd. Wow. Wow. In that short a period. Wow. Yeah, I've been a little shocked by him being this heavily in cash, but then again, I am the optimist. And so, from time, so I was one of the, I don't know, three people that said there wouldn't be a recession in 2023. I continued my no recession in 2024. And I'll continue and say, I don't think there's gonna be a recession in 2026. And I think I'm on safe ground on that one.
Like I said, nobody's sitting here saying they're smarter than Buffett.
Right,
Nobody's saying that they have a better investment record or he's not, one of the greatest of all time.
right.
I'm critical of the media just using his cash hoard as some sort of like fear porn for the markets. And like, what does he know? Like, it's always like, what does he know? Like, why is he sitting on so much cash? Well, why don't you post that every day with the S&P ticker going up from 4,900 to 6,900 and say, what doesn't? Like what's being the better question I think would draw me in and like, what are they actually missing? So anyway, that was the whole thing. I'm not critical of, I hope he, has a wonderful, well-deserved retirement. I think the company has done great over a large span of time. It's just putting it. I mean, this is one of the six biggest melt ups in the S&P in the last 50 years in 6 months. This is one of the five biggest melt ups. So to say that you're sitting on the sidelines for that and no one's going to ask a critical question of it, I just think that that's like I think it's appropriate
All right. So
to ask questions.
let me get into you. I don't think that you and I have talked about this before. Maybe we have, but let me bring it up again if I did. And that is probably three, four, five different posters on X give us a daily dose of the highest equities at all time, the highest gold prices, the highest, Bitcoin, and what are we going to do? It's another kind of again, a crisis because things are so good. And I've been developing this theory for a very long time. Every generation thinks that they're special. I mean, you go back, I'll bet you that if you went back into the deepest, darkest parts of the dark ages, that generation would have gone, yeah, this is going to be the year, you know. But I think this is a time that we can't compare. We've got over 50% of the wealth in the hands of people 55 and older. We've got 45% of the people in the country who have no mortgage and people paying off their mortgages every day. And in addition to that, we've got this boomer generation, which is going to start their fade out and transfer their money to the next two generations. You've got the children, I'm sorry, my grandchildren and my children. My children didn't follow this, by the way. All four of my children married early and had lots of babies. I've got 11 grandchildren. But typical right now is you marry at 30 if you ever marry, and then you might have a child. You know, well, that impacts housing, it impacts cars, it impacts travel. I mean, so I didn't have my first child until I was 38. Man, my first wife and I, we lived the life of Riley, man, two professional incomes and no kids in our 20s and 30s. Well, it's kind of hard to go, oh, let me see, you know, let me stop with all this fun and start taking some responsibility. Anyway, and then we add AI to this.
Yeah.
What's your thinking?
Um, every generation does think at some point they're the greatest. I don't know if this current younger generation does. It feels different. I mean, it feels heavily bifurcated with a set of self-starters that are trying to start businesses, that are trying to do something related to AI, tech. But I think it's moving so quickly under people's feet now that, I mean, you would have told somebody 5 years ago you should study computer engineering, you should study writing software, and you'll be fine.
Yeah.
I don't know if that's the answer. I don't know if that's the correct answer right now. And I actually think if you told somebody 5 years ago you should learn trade, you should learn be an electrician, you should learn about installing gas lines, working with plumbing, that is probably still the way to go, actually, in many respects. And it's going to come down to, do you know how to prompt AI, and do you know how to lead large scale efforts across many types of people, machines, AIs? That's what I think this is coming down to. I think this generation, we, it, it's, I mean, this could be an entire show.
Right.
We lost an entire generation of people that knew how to make things in factories and manufacturing. And for the last 20 to 30 years, we've been telling people, become a doctor, become a lawyer, do something related to software. We weren't even really encouraging a lot of hardware engineering,
Oh,
although those fields have still done well and they should do well. But we've been encouraging all these things, and then we've been, relieving student loans for things that really don't generate and make
yeah.
useful things for product and for GDP. And so I just think we're a bit lost. I think other countries have been more focused on creating the next generation of things. We could have had the smartphone here. There's no reason. We had the non-smartphone here, and we gave that away to China. And we could have retained that, and we could have had this, or we gave that to them. And then they took that and ran with it and really started working on batteries, development of battery. China wasn't a battery powerhouse for most of the ramp up of the smart. It was actually South Korea
Hmm.
was. It was LG and Samsung that were honestly powering a lot of that, and China only came on the last several years. So I mean, I'm a bit all over the place, but yeah, I do think every generation tries to tag themselves with why they believe they're special, but you really have to look at yourself relative to historical norms and then other competing countries and figure out, are we really special, or is this the generation that seeded manufacturing? Is this the generation that seeded other major GDP growth drivers to other countries? That's the question we have to ask ourselves, and we have to, I think, be maniacal about staying on top of that and not letting that happen. Not losing in AI, not losing in AI driven manufacturing and what that looks like. Nobody's actually developed. I wrote a post about it. People think we're in an AI bubble. There isn't a lick of AI in most major manufacturing shops in the world. So to think that we're in an AI bubble because we have a lot of chatbots, and Elon has talked about, what they're doing in physical real world AI. We haven't even touched. So that physical real world AI isn't really out there in volume besides the million or so Teslas, and there's not a lick of stuff done in manufacturing yet related to AI. I'll challenge anybody on that.
Oh,
And I
100.
know that there's some things that are out there here or there, but we're not at a place right now where AI is driving most of the decision and action in factories.
Hmm.
And that's probably what end state needs to look like. So this generation needs to grab a hold of that. We need to grab a hold of the next set of advanced manufacturing. We need to grab a hold of certain things and not let them go. And we need government support to be maniacal, and we need those two things to work together. Because what's happened in other countries is their governments, their permitting, their government incentives, everything's been associated with massive growth in GDP and industries. And here, what have we been doing until now?
Until now.
So
Jeff, I appreciate you coming on. Is there any last word of wisdom that you'd like to share? I mean, sometimes there's like that one thing that's on your mind, you know?
I would just say stay focused, look for early warning signs. This whole cockroach theory about this one bank that failed and the market's reacting, oh, there's got to be more behind it. Well, in Silicon Valley failed, there wasn't anything else. There's may have been one other. I mean, there wasn't some massive flood of banks failing, but that was a big market clearing event. I would just say, stay focused, use common sense, don't overreact to certain things. And if we're winning in AI and we're growing the economy meaningfully, I think we're going to be okay. We have to work through some of these societal issues that continue to continue to maybe slow us down, but I think there's going to be some element. If you go back 100 years, there's been some element of that all the time. But yeah, I would say words of wisdom is, l- be cognizant of the time we're in now and the rate of change of things, and don't let we can't let these things go. We can't let China beat us in AI. We have to bring manufacturing and reshore it smartly in the US. And there's these things that we have to do, or we will be, you know, we will be bending the knee to other countries. I just don't think that's something that the US is ever accustomed to, nor should we be.
No, 100%. All right. Well, having said all that, Jeff, thanks. So, I do want to mention to people that, if you didn't catch it yet, earlier today we did Brian Wang was on. And so you may want to take a look at what he had to say about some of these issues. But we also went on in a couple of really different directions with nuclear and with data centers in on satellites in the strato whatever that sphere is on maybe on SpaceX starships. I'm
Yeah,
not
we
sure.
can't lose space either. That's the other area.
Can't lose space either. Well, I think we're ahead on that one. All right, Jeff. Thanks again, and to all of you out there, it's been great talking to you.